Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Today, I have an upload that, well, it's got vocalization and pictures, or a picture that I've shared with you before, taken by the Umatilla Sheriff's Department. Before we get into this upload, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and my merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Those links, except my merch, are in the description below. My merch is displayed below the video. Dogman, Frightening Encounters, Volume 1, 2, and 3, the audiobook versions. Written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeffrey Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, the links to which are also in the description as well. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's get on with today's upload. Shall we? Also, really quick, a good friend of mine has just put the second story arc on a comic book that I truly, truly love. It is called HEADLESS, and I am just blown away. I was blown away by the first story arc of it, but they reached out to me and said, hey, the second story arc of HEADLESS is up and going to be available very soon. I'm going to link if you guys are interested in horror comics, I'm going to link the link to HEADLESS in the description as well also. Sorry. Now, let's get on with the upload. So, the Pacific Northwest has been a hotspot for Dogman and Bigfoot sightings for a very long time now. We have Washington, Oregon, the upper part of California. And I really believe that these creatures are just attracted to the area because you have almost, well, it is a rainforest. It's not a tropical rainforest, but it's a rainforest, and there's plenty of food, plenty of shelter, and water. I believe that they are attracted to this area because there's not a lot of human intrusion. Now, just recently in Umatilla, Oregon, a sheriff deputy took a photo of what I believe to be a dogman. I shared that with you. And then a couple of years before that, on the Umatilla Indian Reservation, there was a vocalization recorded, which I believe to be a dogman as well. I'm not discrediting or saying it's not Bigfoot. I don't believe it is. And I've got nothing against Bigfoot encounters. I've shared plenty on this channel. I'm just stating that I really believe these two, the vocalization and the picture, to be a dogman. I believe there is something going on, whether it be a travel way for the dogman through Umatilla, possibly. But yeah, we're getting some really interesting sightings and vocalizations out of that area. So I want to share some facts, the vocalization, the picture, and I'd like to share some encounters. So, it's Nick. I grew up in Dixie, Washington. I'm 23 years old. My encounter takes place about a year and a half ago. It was early August when my friends invited me to go camping for the weekend with them. The place was in the Umatilla National Forest, about 3 miles past Jubilee Lake. Modat Campgrounds in Oregon. It's a beautiful area and plenty of places to go hiking. Later in the evening, after eating a great meal of venison, elk, moose that a friend had brought, which may have very well helped getting their attention on the last day. It was just my friends, Jordan, Josh, and myself, awake by the fire, with a number of friends sleeping around in their tents. I was resting on a cot about 5 feet away from the fire and about 20 feet away from the edge of the woods that the soon coming noise would come from. It was somewhere around 11:30 p.m. Jordan gets up from his chair and walks over to the edge of the tree line nearest me to relieve himself. In the middle of doing so, there was a sudden growl noise that came from about 15 yards into the trees. This was enough to cut off Jordan in midstream and run backwards back to the fire. Josh and I were on our feet within a blink of an eye, and without even realizing it, I had grabbed my knife off my side. All of us, pretty much at the same time, started looking at each other and started to question as whether or not we heard the same thing and what the hell it could have been. All growing up in the little town of Dixie, only a couple of miles from being right in the blues, and we were all well aware of what kind of animals to expect, having spent many nights out in the mountains. We were not impaired in any way, having partied a little too hard the last few nights and having to wake up early to leave the next day. After about a minute, Jordan and I ran back to our tent, grabbed a machete and a big flashlight. We inspected the woods as best as we could from about 5 feet in. After seeing nothing, right away we started smacking trees and yelling, basically making a lot of racket in case it was a cougar or something. We figured whatever it was would run away if we made enough noise and whatnot. After doing that, we made the fire up a bit bigger and made sure to have some branches sticking out, just in case we had to throw them. We all calmed down after about 20 minutes or so and went back to the regular chit-chat. An hour and 15 minutes goes by when out of nowhere, from the same exact spot we heard the noise, we hear a roar and a sudden smashing of what sounded like large hammers on wood and tree branches violently snapping, and thud, 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 and then complete silence. In about 6 thuds that we were able to hear, it traveled about 35 to 40 yards. While this was happening, we all stand back up and start screaming, "What is it?" So on and so forth, not willing to even go near the edge of the woods. One of the people sleeping in the tent nearest to everything comes bolting out, squealing her head off, and freaking out, wanting to know what the heck is going on. This was enough to get the guy with the 44 out of bed and whatnot, but by this time he was there, nothing left that he could really do. A good half an hour goes by and he finally goes back to sleep, as well as Casey, the one who was sleeping nearest the ruckus, and the 3 of us go back to sitting around the fire. 20 minutes later, we hear the sounds, thud, 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 only further away in the distance, and walking away. We at that point are exhausted and decide to go to sleep. It just so happens that we were all sleeping in a 4-person tent, and it just so happened that the zipper on the door was broken, so it was flapping open all night. When we awoke the next day, all 3 of us had about 2 to 5 pine cones around our heads. I know the door in the tent was broken, but there's just no damn way we all dragged that many pine cones in and led them up to our heads. I found a very large footprint outside of our tent, and when examining the area where all the noise had happened the night before, there were 2 10-foot and 15-foot trees broken in 2 spots as if something had grabbed it with 2 hands and bent it over with ease. This next part is where the Umatilla sheriff and their picture comes into play. Hermiston, Oregon. What would you do if you went into your backyard for some fresh air and found yourself in a staring contest with a big black bear? For some, panic would ensue. Others may freeze, but your best bet is to go back inside and call your local authorities. According to a social media post from the Umatilla County Sheriff's Office, that's what an employee at the UPS Customer Center on Westport Lane in Hermiston did last night after seeing a large animal roaming the nearby property. Authorities say the caller contacted dispatch shortly before 1 in the morning on October 21st, 2021, on a stretch of land off near where his job site is. The Umatilla County Sheriff's deputy responded to the scene and spotted what he described as a large bear. He took a quick picture as shown above and shifted his focus toward notifying the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. Since last night, there has not been any further updates about this creature. It has been spotted or reported in the Hermiston area since. However, a majority of commenters on the UCSO Facebook page believe that this image is not a bear but a large dog or Bigfoot instead. Both the UPS employee and Umatilla County deputy report seeing a bear. We'll leave you to make up your own conclusions on what kind of animal or creature this is, and we'll issue an update if Umatilla County authorities announce further details about this appearance. And now this is where the Umatilla Indian Reservation vocalization comes into play. Bigfoot or animals? Strange sounds coming from a swamp on Umatilla Indian Reservation. The eerie late-night serenades began in November and emanate from a brushy swamp on the east of Pendleton. The cries range from high-pitched screams to basso profundo roars. "It's causing an uproar around here," said Sylvia Minthorn, who lives in a tribal housing unit near the swamp, where she used to play as a child. She's seen grown men's hair stand on end when the shrieks commence. Colleen Chance, a tribal housing authority employee, keeps a recording of the howls on her phone. "It's kind of spooky," she says. "Some say it's fox, some say it's a female coyote, and some say it's Sasquatch. I don't know what it is." So far, no one's pinpointed the source of the noise on this rugged 178,000-acre reservation that extends into northeastern Oregon Blue Mountain and is home to about 1,500 people. The swamp in question borders the old reservation community of Mission in a canyon north. Phone calls about the whales started coming in last month to the housing authority, and the office has had about a half a dozen so far. More could come in because the cries are continuing from time to time. Some tenants on the reservation's 190 rentals and 32 homes admitted being afraid, and one man reported that his dogs were too terrified to go outside, said Josh Franken, the housing authority's interim director. "This guy was rather scared himself," Franken said. A rumor quickly spread that the cries were made by a young Bigfoot that got separated from the rest of his clan. "It's difficult to shrug off accounts," said Marcus Luke, the housing authority's home ownership counselor. "Many on the reservation are woodsy-type folk, familiar with animals, and are not prone to taking fright at nighttime commotion. Some members of the Confederated Umatilla, Walla Walla, and Cayuse tribes believe the noise are coming from Bigfoot, the mythical man-like creature said to roam the Pacific Northwest forest. Bigfoot is part of the tribal culture, tradition, and spiritual beliefs," said Luke, a follower of the Washat, or seven-drum religion, and a longhouse drummer and singer. "We have stories about it," he said. The Bigfoot lore. To the Bigfoot hunters, the Blue Mountains of Oregon and Washington around the Umatilla Indian Reservation has been a hot spot since a Walla Walla cyclist named Peter Luther found a 19-inch long bear footprint in 1966 along the Tiger Canyon Road, east of Walla Walla on the Oregon-Washington border, and just north of the reservation. The Blues' celebrity for giant hairy hominids even survived in 2002 death of 84-year-old prankster Ray L. Wallace of Centralia, Washington. Wallace's family revealed after his funeral that he had gleefully used strap-on wooden feet to make tracks around the West since 1958. Wallace was, they said, the source of the Northwest Bigfoot tales. Carl Sheeler, wildlife program manager for the tribes, said several animals in this corner of Oregon are known for making strange noises, including cougars. When they are breeding, it is absolutely hair-raising, he said. And the first time a person hears a fox calling in the night, kind of echoing around the canyons, it raises the hair on the back of your neck, Sheeler said. The wetland is a perfect place to have an echoing call sound eerie. But many who have heard the racket dismiss such notions. Foxes do sound creepy, said Sylvia Minthorn. But it's not the same sound, not even close. Her mother, Denise, believes more than one creature is out there in the darkness. She's heard shrieks from two different directions at once, as if two animals were communicating. It was no noise I had ever heard before, she said. It was like barroom brawls and laughter. Armand Minthro, Sylvia Minthro's uncle and tribal spiritual leader, said he may have stumbled onto evidence of Sasquatch's presence while hunting in the Blue Mountains many years ago. Right in the middle of the road was this great big footprint, perhaps 16 or 18 inches long and man-like, he said. The enormous stride carried across the road, leaving one footprint in the middle. Nevertheless, he said the current shrieks could be anything. We probably will never know what made those sounds. And here are those sounds with the current picture of the creature that I believe to be a dogman, and many residents of the area claim to be a large dog, not a bear. So, in my eyes, the vocalization, absolutely terrifying and compelling, just like the picture. Folks around that area are familiar with Bigfoot. They're familiar with black bear. Interestingly enough, people on Facebook are calling it a huge or large dog. There's no dog that big, unless it's a dogman. Let's get into some encounters now. I live in this very small town in eastern Oregon. I don't think there's ever been a sighting of a dogman in my neck of the woods. Tons of Bigfoot sightings, but not this beast. Now, I was high when I saw this thing, and a lot of people will say that when you're high, you see stuff, but not me. With me, it's medicinal. It helps with my glaucoma, headaches, and depression. Last night, I had finished writing a couple of papers for my college courses, and I finished up. I could feel the hair on the back of my neck start to stand. I turned to my window where the blinds are down but not folded, like you could somewhat see through them. I could have sworn something moved to the left side of my house, where the corner of my room is. I figured it was an owl or something, so I didn't freak myself out. I closed the blinds and head out to the kitchen to grab a drink. In my house, the only light you can get at night is by the outdoor lighthouse that acts like a floodlight to an extent, and the other source would be Christmas lights and a moonlight. I didn't want to turn anything on, so I didn't want to wake up any of my folks. So I had everything off. While I was grabbing a drink of water at the kitchen sink, I look outside, and there was this thing standing behind our Christmas tree. I know it was a thing and not a person because it was almost as tall as the tree that's a good 7 feet tall. I froze. I could see two greenish yellow eyes. They reminded me of my dog whenever you would shine a light at them. This thing made my skin crawl. I wanted to scream and shout and get this creature away from my house. The eyes blinked a couple of times, but just stared me down. I couldn't make a good look at what the face looked like, but I tried to turn the kitchen light on and couldn't even make out what I was seeing until I walked to the sliding screen door that connects to the living room. That thing must have been staring at me or something because I walked over there to see if the light reflected, and I got way more than I bargained for. I saw the lanky legs, a very skinny body, and the last thing I could make out was a snout. I haven't heard of any Bigfoot around here with a long snout. I tried to get some pictures, but it was too dark to really pick up anything, even with the light coming from the kitchen to reflect on it. My phone could make out a vague shape, but you could confuse that easily with the tree. I tried to use the flash, but no good. I think that's how I scared it off. After a minute, maybe less, of it staring me down in the living room, it turned around and hunkered down on all fours and ran toward the open field. I did not dare step outside, but in the bathroom, where we have this tiny window cracked open, I could hear a bunch of cows and a few horses going nuts. I'm used to hearing coyote noises whenever the local horses neigh or the cows get in an uproar, but not this time. They were freaking out, what seemed to be over nothing. I haven't heard cows or horses be that upset when it's this close to winter. Today's final encounter. I've shared this encounter before, but I wanted to include it on this Oregon-based upload about Dogman. One day I ran into a friend of mine and we started chatting. She said she was going through some tough times and living in a tent with her boyfriend and dog by the Rogue River in southern Oregon. She told me of some strange events they were experiencing at night while sleeping in their tent. Something was coming into close proximity of their tent, making grunting and snorting noises, and occasionally a terrifying screaming sound that she could best describe as a woman wailing in distress. Even on the occasion that they weren't hearing anything distinct, their large cane corso dog would take notice of a twig snapping or unremarkable noise, whimper, and then belly crawl onto them and proceed to whimper and shake in terror. While this activity was mystifying to them, to me, it sounded suspiciously similar to other events I've heard about. I made arrangements to go to this property they were staying on, right along the Rogue River, to see if I could see any strange happenings. The first night there was nothing notable. However, I did speak to one of the people staying on the property in a dwelling closer to the front of the property's house. I asked him if he had seen anything strange on the property, and he told me that one night he had heard some kind of violent altercation occur near the river. The next day he went down to the river's edge, and on the muddy shores looked like two beings had scrapped it out. The ground was tore up, and it led into the river itself, leading him to believe something had killed something else and dragged it into the river. I asked him if he had any idea of what was fighting, and he had no idea. But he did mention his belief in a humanoid-type being that crawled on all fours, longed for limbed gray skin, and moved extremely fast because of the long length of its slender arms. And, for whatever reason, he didn't elaborate on it. Believing they came out of the trees and would slither down them at night. Okay, weird. I'm pretty certain this guy is rolling the meth pipe pretty hard, but I couldn't help but notice how closely this description of this thing is the so-called rake. And if you've heard Dogman encounters, there seems to be some component to this story where a dogman hunts this being and why. The second night, I was perched on the second-story balcony facing the river. The friend had brought me to the property along with her boyfriend had left for the night. I didn't mind hanging out on the deck as it was a warm summer night, and occasionally I would hang out with the house tenants and come back to observe. The rear portion of this property is about a half an acre long and narrow. To the right is an empty house, and even further to the right is an old lodge or retreat from the 50s that has been long since abandoned and become decrepit. To the left sat a wrecking yard separated by a 10-foot hedgerow, then ran the entirety of the property down to the river. As I sat there on the deck chain smoking, I had this internal dialogue with myself and it, asking it to reveal itself to me, projecting the thought of, "I come in peace, please don't kill me." As I sat on the deck smoking and reading, I heard twigs snapping, gentle rustling in the hedgerow closer to the river. I stood up, gazing down at a sapling positioned closely to the hedgerow, and watched a large silhouette appear out of nothingness, somehow traversing a wall of nearly impenetrable hedgerow without causing a cacophony, save for a snapping twig and rustling of a few leaves, or somehow scaling down from a massive tree that sat along the river's edge. And while I could distinctly see this thing's silhouette, I was unable to make out its distinct features as it stayed just out of illumination of the deck's nightlight, although I didn't need to see it distinctly to know what it was, as the inner lit amber eyes were telltale clue. No natural animal has eyes like this. Its eyes are not highly reflective like a cat's. They are literally creating light, glowing in amber color. Its eyes were separated about 7 to 8 inches, and it stood about 7 feet tall. Simultaneously, as this entity stepped forward to make itself known, I saw at least a few sets of self-lit amber eyes peering through the hedgerow in my direction. I had prepared mentally for this moment. That's why I was here. I was scared, who wouldn't be, but my curiosity outweighed my self-preservation at the time. The feeling I had gazing down on this being can only be described as an adrenaline dump. It didn't show any aggression. It basically did what I hoped for. It came forward, presented itself, stood there, and stared at it for what seemed like 10 minutes, but in reality it was about 30 seconds before I internally projected respect and gratitude for the encounter and turned to walk into the house. So, that's today's upload. To me, Umatilla is a hot spot for Dogman. Maybe not to you. Maybe it's something else. I don't know. But I feel like it is. I really do. I just... That picture, the sounds, the descriptions of all of these encounters and stories just spells and smells like Dogman to me. Which is really terrifying, but kind of gratifying, like this guy said. You know, will I ever want another encounter? No. Oh, God, no. But am I fascinated by these creatures? More so than anything, I believe. These creatures terrify me, but really, really fascinate me. And I just want to know more about them. Just like you guys. And, you know, I've got some subscribers that I've got to call. I've got some emails that I will get to this week. Hopefully, I've got one person that I want to contact tomorrow who's got a couple of different encounters they said via their email. So I'm gonna get to that and start doing some subscriber interviews. Also, this weekend I'm going to where I had my encounter, and I'm going to video it and tell the story of where everything happened. like I said, it was in a cul-de-sac that was full of skeletal houses, and now these houses are 20-something years old. But it's still going to be terrifying for me to go there, just because. Do I think they're there still? I don't know. Probably not. But just the feeling that I'll get when I go there, the remembrance, I guess. So, all right, guys. With that, I want to thank everybody for always tuning in, the support. We hit 26,000 subscribers today, guys. Holy cow! Never imagined that ever. We did it. My God, I cannot believe it. All right, with that, I'm going to bid you farewell. Be kind to each other, and may the Great Spirit watch over all of us and guide us through our path of life.